Are you a guy who grew up reading Percy Jackson, who loved reading, or maybe even doesn't love reading, and growing up you were obsessed with Greek mythology and history, and especially the Roman Empire, and you thought to yourself, man, I really wish The Hunger Games was written for boys. Not to say that The Hunger Games can't be read by boys, but you get where I'm going with this. Hi, and welcome back to Orbiting the Shelf, where today I am talking about the Red Rising trilogy. And despite being a very science fiction focused channel, I hadn't read these yet and was actually encouraged to by my wife. I had bought the books, left them sitting on my shelf for quite a while, and they were like, dude, you have to get in on this. Red God is coming out soon, and you have to get through these. They're masterpieces, they're fun, they're super cool. And since April through May was sort of a release drought while we waited for the middle half of May for Devils and the Incandescents and all the other fun releases coming out this month, I said, sure, why not? I'll give these a read. Now, granted, this is going to be a very spoiler-heavy video, so if you haven't read them, I would highly encourage you to. As you know, they are pretty much masterpieces, and then come back to this and give me your thoughts later. Now, with that being said, the first book is like a little bit of a hump you have to get over, unless you're not a big reader and you really don't mind some tropey YA nonsense. The first book was like, it almost stopped me from getting to the masterpieces that were the second and third, and I have very few gripes about this book. I think the characters are amazing, the settings are amazing, the culture and this whole society is done so well. Pierce Brown does an excellent job doing everything justice. He is really a master of world building. But with that being said, I have like 1.5 gripes. My only gripe would be that the first book is a little bit hard to get through, and it very much is tropey YA, even though it's labeled adult fiction, but I think the first 3 books are very much young adult fiction. I think just some of the more mature themes barely let it slip by. Granted, if you can classify The Hunger Games as YA, I think the first 3 books of the Red Rising, trilogy times 2, whatever you would call that, should be labeled as YA. I think that would only be fair. And it's very tropey, it hits every YA note, and it is quite literally the age-old story of poor teenager living in the slums under the thumb of a very unkind fascist government. There's a caste system, and they are at the bottom of the totem pole. The only tropey YA beat it misses is that the character himself is not upset with the government, his wife is, and the death of his wife is what incites him into starting this rising, or a rebellion. Red Rebellion doesn't have the same ring to it. That sounds like Eastern European fascist propaganda, communist propaganda rather. Anyways, there's like the inciting incident, which in every other dystopian YA novel, you know, it's like the death of a family member, Katniss volunteering to go through the games instead of her sister, and this book is no different. Darrow's wife is killed by the fascist government, and he's like, I'm gonna do something about this, after kind of being executed, and it just hits every single tropey YA dystopian novel beat it possibly can. There's no getting around the fact that the first part of the trilogy is just a copy-paste story. It's derivative, it's done a million times before, it's super predictable, aside from some like mini plot points, like character deaths that aren't character deaths, some twists that you don't see coming. It's very predictable. It's classic special boy from poor district rises up against fascist government and wins. You literally couldn't write a more predictable, more derivative, more generic story. So with that being said, why do I call it a masterpiece? Well, I think that's because Red Rising does something really well that I talk about often on the channel. If you've watched my videos before, I've talked about how the worst thing a piece of art can be is boring. It doesn't matter how important the message is. It doesn't matter how well written, how well painted, how well directed it is. If a piece of art is boring, there will never be an audience to consume it and deliver that message to. The first thing you have to be before you be anything is entertaining. So I think the rule of cool is one of the most sacred rules when writing anything. And this is coming from me, a well-known book snob, with a handful of hate watchers who let me know I'm a book snob with bad opinions. And so I prioritize the rule of cool above all else. Now, this is what Pierce Brown does so well in Red Rising. Even though it's derivative, it's predictable, and it's straight up just generic YA ripoff story dystopian novel nonsense. He makes it cool. At every turn, it's entertaining. The pace is high. Your heartbeat's always up. You're on the edge of your seat. You never know who's going to get offed next, what plot point's going to get advanced in some weird way, and it is gripping. And so you're delivered this classic message that you've had delivered to you a million times before. Teenager saves the world, makes the world a better place, and you enjoy it. And you know, I think a lot of authors and a lot of books have tried to do this before. I mean, when we were kids, assuming you're older Gen Z like me, there was just a slew of dystopian novels that were ripping off the Hunger Games, and that train back then is kind of like romantasy now. It was unstoppable. There was a million just dog shit books being published for the sake of capitalizing on that trend. And I think Pierce Brown is the only author who's done that sort of like niche justice since the Hunger Games. I forgot who wrote that, but I think he's the first person to really do dystopian YA justice in a very long time and in such a spectacular way. In fact, even though The Hunger Games was sort of like the original dystopian YA novel, I think Pierce Brown did it better. Now, with that being said, I know, please don't come for me because I called it generic, derivative, etc. It's just quite literally the most sturdy scaffolding to hang a story on ever built. Special teenager with special talents and a hate for the government saves the day and makes their society better until the next trilogy. But with that being said, it's amazing, it's phenomenal, and he does it justice, he does it well, and he does it exceedingly entertaining, so all can be forgiven. The rule of cool supersedes all, and the message is fine, plot is fine, but where Pierce Brown really succeeds is the world building. And that's why I said if you were a history buff kid who was really into Greek mythology and the Roman Empire and stuff like that, you're gonna absolutely love this, and I'd be willing to wager that this is probably your favorite book now. Pierce Brown does an excellent job at sort of capturing the characteristics of leaders in this time period. He does an excellent job capturing the essence of speeches and inspiration and leadership, and he does an excellent job encapsulating everything we think of in the modern era when it comes to like the Roman empires and legendary leaders of old and their sort of strange cult followings. I think what Pierce Brown lacks in sort of like originality when it comes to the scaffolding of his story and the structure of his story, he more than makes up for in world building. I think Pierce Brown is an S-tier world builder. I think he can be ranked up there with the best of them. I would consider Pierce Brown almost as good as George Martin when it comes to world building. I really think he'll be looked back upon as sort of like a legendary figure when it comes to that aspect of writing, because the whole caste system of this society is just drenched in deep, believable lore. There is always so much to consume. There's always so much to speculate on. There's always so much extra content sort of that you can interface with as the reader to sink your teeth into. And I think when it came to constructing the golds and the obsidian specifically, he just like did such an amazing job. I can't explain it enough in words. One of the biggest feats you can achieve as an author when it comes to world building is giving the reader something to speculate about, giving them just enough information about strange and mysterious things for them to really sink their teeth into. Like with George Martin, the whole thing about like Valyria and the countries to the east and the Shadowlands. There is so much information that the viewer can speculate on and have conversations with other people about, and that's something that Pierce Brown does really well. And there's sort of a lot of cool messaging in that caste system, and you can take away a lot of potential discussions on political issues and social issues. And I really think where he shines the most is this world building. And I know I'm rambling and repeating myself a lot, but I can't quite speak enough on how well this aspect is done in the books. And when it comes to all of the really awesome speeches in the book and all of the really memorable monologues and dialogues, I think Pierce Brown is a master at crafting memorable speeches, memorable lines, and that's why you see so many people reenacting them here on YouTube and on TikTok, and you see these speeches done by voice actors over and over again. And so once again, he really just hammers home how good he is at abiding to the rule of cool. And I can't can't imagine how much research he had to do potentially to really nail the tone and voice of this sort of like Roman Empire era and instill that so well into all of the leaders in this book. I mean, I believe it was Roke who was the poet. Roke has such a unique voice, and when he speaks, you know he is speaking, and it's eloquent and it's poetic and it's educated. And when Darrow speaks, it's like inspirational and sort of like brutalist. And all of these characters have such unique voices, and the way they talk, you don't even need like dialogue tags to know who's saying what most of the time. And Severo is such an unhinged presence. He's kind of like the wild card scene from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Wait, sorry. The brakes aren't working. No, I'm saying, no, the brakes! Guys, why aren't the brakes working?
Because I cut the brakes! Wild card, bitches!
So just when it comes to characters and world building and dialogue, he really knocks it out of the park. I just imagine he had to do so much research to really nail that tone. When it comes to building characters, he also really exceeds here.
Don't pick your nose, hon.
Crafting a good bad guy is such an art. Writing is an art. Crafting a believable story your audience can buy into is an art. And I think crafting a good bad guy is one of the nichest and like hardest to hit things when it comes to just the overall art of writing fiction. And Pierce knocks this out of the park because a lot of the bad guys in this are so relatable, and their missions and their personal dogmas and philosophies are so easy to buy into. And all of the bad guys just have this feel, this like persona that's older than history itself, of like the fascist demagogue of the people, the populist leader who says all the things the general population wants to hear, but deep down their narrative and their beliefs are problematic. And I think, I forget the guy's name, Mustang's dad, a guy, his name is escaping me for some reason, when he talks about the responsibility of the Golds and how they were literally bred to like usher humanity into the stars and guide them with their sturdy hands, and how other Golds who have like sort of abandoned the creed of being the shepherds of humanity are disgusting, and how their social class of people have sort of failed all of those below them, and how it's important to like rule with an iron fist and to be an intellectual and a warrior, and all of these things combined. It's so easy to like him even though he's kind of like the bad guy for a while, and maybe that says more about me than it does anybody else. I think I am definitely susceptible to like the demagogue fascist style of dude if he just speaks really well.
Obama!
I definitely probably would have been a Caesar supporter back in the day, but who knows? I don't really fall for it in the modern era. Maybe I wouldn't have back then. But anyways, that's all just to say that the bad guys in this series are so well crafted and so believable, and it's just so easy to sort of connect with them. I love how all of the things, Nero Augustus, that's his name, it just came back to me. I love how all the things that Nero Augustus says sort of ring true to a larger societal problem we have as humans spanning across history, where things are good on paper. The idea of something is good on paper until humans come into the picture and ruin it with their human flaws. Like the idea of a superior class of humans who are our strongest, our smartest, our brightest, taking the responsibility off the shoulders of those beneath them in those ways, and being the people responsible for guiding our species to the stars and making the choices is great on paper. Like maybe if we were a hive mind group of aliens, sort of like ants, who didn't have prejudices and biases and problematic philosophies and dogmas and religions, that would work, you know? If we were all just like of one mind and one creed, that would be awesome. I mean, that's how bees work, it's how ants work, and obviously it does great for them. And maybe there are aliens who are hive mind like that somewhere out in the galaxy who are succeeding and doing way better than we are right now. But as humans, that doesn't work for us because our human nature will spoil that eventually, and that's exactly what's happened in this society. This sort of like good on paper philosophy has been ruined by the human nature that is inherent in all of us and even these golds. I mean, they have fallen to greed, they have fallen to sort of like the pleasures of the flesh, and they have subjugated those beneath them. They are no longer responsible shepherds of the flock. They are exploiting those beneath them. They are exploiting their labor, they are exploiting their lives, and the idea of golds being the shepherds of humanity has crumbled to dust, and now they are very obviously just the cruel rulers of humanity, and that's why this system has been dismantled. And I think that just speaks volumes to the sort of like demagogue leaders we are so prone to fall victim to as humans. We really truly want someone who has all the answers, someone who will guide us so that we don't have to think too hard about it, so the responsibility doesn't fall on all of our collective shoulders. So we so willingly give power to these people and enable them, and ultimately they're demagogues. They don't have the best intentions in mind. They fall prey to the temptations of the flesh, and they enable even worse people to come after them. And that's really what's happened here. And I think the message I took from this series is like, stop falling victim to the sort of demagogue figures who always have the answers. Maybe letting Caesar occupy Rome with armies that should have been disbanded is a bad idea. Maybe voting for presidents who have all the answers and they tell you ruling with an iron fist is good and they are gonna fix this alone. They alone are the people you need to put all of your trust and the power into their hands. And I thought this just spoke so well to that. And I think that's something a lot of dystopia novels don't quite encapsulate as well. Even The Hunger Games, granted I read that years and years ago, so I might be forgetting some things there. And so even though Pierce Brown quite literally stole the most like derivative story scaffolding of all time to hang his characters and his story on, I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's good. And one thing that I thought was funny as I read these books is you can see Pierce become a better writer every single book. Every single book you can kind of see him level up per se. In the first book, there's some dialogue that's confusing. Characters get introduced really suddenly and way too fast, and you're kind of struggling to remember who everybody is. I think a lot of the Howlers, like Screwface and Clown and all the other sort of like side characters are super forgettable, and it's because they're introduced like bam bam, and you're just like, who are these people and why do I care? And of course they cement themselves more solidly later on, but I think in the first book it's definitely the weakest, and in the second it gets better, and in the third he really evolves sort of into his final form. And I've started the fourth book in the next trilogy, and once again there's just a huge evolution in his writing and you get more perspectives. But if I had to rank them, I think 3, 2, 1 in those orders. Third book, second book, first book. And a lot of people really don't like Golden Son. It was one of my favorites. I thought it was amazing. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think of it. If I had to rank it, if this were a review video and I were putting it on the subjective scale, I'd give it a strong 9.5. But I think in time, with nostalgia and reflection, I'll be like, you know what, it was a 10. And in my mind now, the only thing keeping it back from being a 10 is the fact that it's like so predictable and so overdone. But like I said, with time and nostalgia, I'll probably look back on it as a 10. But in my mind right now, with the clarity of the story being fresh, I would consider it a 9.5. With that being said, those are just my thoughts on this book. I just wanted to put a video out on it before I start the next trilogy and before Red God comes out. I've taken a break, and right now I'm reading The Devils by Joe Abercrombie because that just came out and I'm super excited for it. But what did I miss? What am I wrong about? Let me know in the comments. This is going to be one of my favorite top 5 sci-fi series of all time. I'm going to go about my day. Like and subscribe if you don't mind. I appreciate every single one of you. Put your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you next time when I review Joe Abercrombie's Devils. Thanks.